Hi everyone, my name is Ellie Andrews and I'm the UC Cooperative Extension Specialty Crops Advisor for Sonoma, Marin, and Napa counties, and I'm going to present on fruit tree management. So here's a general outline of my presentation today. So we're going to start with an introduction to management, then we'll go into types of fruit trees, pruning and protection, nutrient and water management, and then integrated pest management. So that's a big picture outline for today. So I'm going to start with an introduction to fruit tree management in a big picture sense. So when we say management, we're talking about using sustainable practices to promote tree health and optimize fruit production, also known as yield. So when we say sustainable, we're talking about both economically and environmentally sustainable. Tree health and yield is just referring to the fact that healthy trees will have higher yield. And, I'm using the word optimize here just to illustrate that we want to make the most out of available resources in any situation. So essentially, this is just efficient resource management at whatever scale you're at. So thinking about active management as something we do proactively, deliberately, thoughtfully, there's a lot of things to think about. So we have tree selection and planting, irrigation, nutrients and soil management, sunburn and frost protection, integrated pest management, pruning and thinning. So there's a lot to think about here. But overall, the goal is to promote plant health and fruit production. So we're going to do enough to keep these trees healthy while using our resources efficiently. And so we're going to get into how much, how often, best practices. So I wanted to take a moment and highlight this great website. I'm sure you're all familiar with this already, but it's on the UC California Backyard Orchard website. We have a little excerpt about why you might want to have a backyard orchard. So for whatever reason, the home orchard is a popular option and can also be a fruitful endeavor. When the decision to create a home orchard is based on little more than the desire to plant a few trees and anticipate fruit, then failure can be the probable outcome. But when a home orchard is based on understanding that it is, in fact, a living expression of genetics, interacting with soils, weather, tree spacing, pests, and lots of other factors, then the outcome will likely be one of success. So I just wanted to highlight this last part where, there are so many different interactions happening, and it does feel like a lot to think about, but I'm going to break things down into sections, and so we'll go through everything. But just bear in mind that these things do interact with each other since we're dealing with living systems. So I also wanted to highlight that, no management is essentially bad management. So if you hear somebody say, I just want to let nature do its thing, I just want to encourage everyone to remember we're part of nature. Thankfully, we're a part of these systems. And ultimately, neglect actively encourages issues like insect pests, plant pathogens, invasive species, things like that. So we need to be actively involved in our management practices. These can affect your neighbors' trees too, these issues, and ultimately it's just bad for the environment, both at a site-specific level, but also at a regional scale as well. And if trees aren't getting the resources they need, they can become stunted, and they're not going to grow as much, they're not going to produce as much fruit. So if your trees are not strategically managed, then they'll be unhealthy, weak, they're going to have higher susceptibility to insect pests and pathogens. They won't really be able to compete with weeds and vegetation for water and nutrients as effectively. And ultimately, it's a waste of time and money. So here's just one example of a disease on an apple tree. We're going to get more into that later. I also wanted to mention briefly that poor tree health can lead to pretty intense lichen formation. So a little bit is probably to be expected in our region. But if you see a lot of lichen formation, just bear in mind that normally bark tends to shed off pretty frequently enough to prevent lichen from establishing to this degree. Lichen doesn't really damage the tree, but it is an indicator of poor tree health that is not really growing at the rate that it should be. So I wanted to just include a slide on this because it's something I see a lot and a question I get asked a lot. So overall, thinking about active management, these crops have been bred for hundreds of years to flourish under conditions that we humans create through good active management. So we need to actively and thoughtfully manage our fruit trees in order to have healthy trees and good fruit production. And just a reminder that we are not separate from nature, we're part of it.